I got the call at 6:07 a.m. That ungodly time when even the sun is still debating whether to rise. It's official. You got the job, the voice on the other end said. You're the new principal of Langston High. And just like that, 15 years of quiet fury began to bloom into something else. The sun hadn't yet crept past the row of elms lining Langston's main entrance, but I was already standing in front of the glass doors, badge clipped to my chest. The new keycard felt weightless in my palm. I ran it across the scanner. A green light blinked. Click. I stepped inside. The halls smelled the same. Varnish and floor wax, overlaid with the must of adolescence and institutional indifference. The lockers hadn't changed, nor had the way the fluorescent lights hummed just slightly off pitch. I took slow steps, like someone revisiting a crime scene. Because, in a way, I was. Room 213. That door still creaked. Behind it, in the far left corner of the classroom, stood the desk that once belonged to Mr. Raymond Denton, the man who made me hate coming to school. The man who made it impossible for me to look anyone in the eye for the better part of my teenage years. The man who once laughed, audibly, in front of a full class, when I got my final project grade. Not because I failed, but because I tried. It's okay, we're not all cut out for college, he'd said, chuckling as the class joined in. Trade schools need students too. That day, I burned the essay I had spent 6 weeks writing. Every draft, every note, every hope. Gone. I'd been a quiet kid. I became quieter. I finished school, barely, avoided reunions, ignored alumni invites. But I remembered. Every day, every comment, every humiliation he laced with a grin. And then I vanished from Langston. Or so it seemed. College, night school, administrative licenses, years in the district office, then assistant principal at a different school across town. Patient, invisible, but climbing. Until last week. The outgoing principal was retiring. And I, Marcus Bell, was finally returning. At 7:43 a.m., teachers began to arrive. I watched from the front office, through the one-way glass, coffee in hand. And then I saw him. Same corduroy blazer. Same disapproving squint. Raymond Denton. He hadn't changed. Not in the ways that mattered. He strolled in, nodding to the secretary with the smugness of tenure and decades of survival. He didn't recognize me. Of course not. Not yet. Our first meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Staff orientation. Just introductions, they said. I walked into the room at 9:59, deliberately a minute early. 40 teachers sat in rows of folding chairs. Whispering, joking, half listening. Good morning, I said. The room quieted. My name is Marcus Bell. I'm your new principal. Some polite applause. A few raised eyebrows. Then the typical questions. Policies. Attendance tracking. Budget constraints. Same old rhythm. Until I spotted him in the back. Mr. Denton. Arms crossed. Head slightly tilted. The way he always looked at students he'd already given up on. He raised his hand halfway through the Q&A. Yes, Mr. Denton, he said flatly. History department. 28 years. Ah, right, I said, keeping my voice measured. Nice to see you again. Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty. You're not from Langston, he said, sounding more curious than confrontational. New to the district? I held his gaze. No, I was a student here. Some teachers chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. It wasn't. I graduated in 2010. You taught U.S. history. Period 3. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. I saw it in his eyes. The moment recognition hit him like a cold slap. I remember you now, he muttered. I'm sure you do, I said, smiling. Let's move on. But the room had shifted. Not just for him. For me. For 15 years I had rehearsed this return in my mind. How it would feel. How I'd keep my face calm, my voice neutral, while the weight of his humiliation still sat in my lungs. And now here I was. Smiling. Leading. Wearing a suit that cost more than he made in a month. With the power to evaluate, to reassign, to remove. That night, I sat alone in the principal's office long after the last teacher had gone home. Staring at the staff roster. At his name. Denton, Raymond. Still protected by tenure. Still in a role where he could shape young minds. Or crush them, like he'd tried to crush mine. But this time, he wasn't the one holding the red pen. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The room dark except for a single desk lamp. It was time. Time to plan. Time to watch. Time to remember every rule he ever ignored. Every minute he spent coasting. Every quiet complaint I'd overheard today from younger teachers too afraid to speak up. I wasn't afraid. And I wasn't done. The second week of school is when the masks start to slip. By then, the smiles at morning sign-in shrink into nods. The classroom doors stay closed longer. The email replies get shorter. And the small infractions, the ones that don't show up in performance reviews, start to reappear like rust bleeding through paint. I started with walkthroughs. Unannounced. Routine, I told them. But I lingered in Denton's room. He never called me Mr. Bell like the others did. It was always just Bell, delivered with a thin smirk, like a shared joke between colleagues that only he understood. You're welcome to observe, he said on Tuesday. But I've been teaching longer than you've been alive. You might find it a bit advanced. I stood in the back, silent. His class was quiet. Too quiet. Rows of students sitting stiff, speaking only when called upon, voices clipped and afraid to be wrong. He still used fear as a motivator. Still chuckled at confused answers. Still dismissed effort if it didn't meet his particular brand of correct. After class, I stayed behind. Your methods haven't changed much, I said casually, flipping through a worksheet one of his students had left behind. It was graded. Harshly. Red pen slashed through the margins. The word rewrite was scrawled in capital letters across the top. If it works, why fix it? Denton shrugged. It's a new generation, I said. Different students. Different needs. Same excuses, he muttered, brushing past me. Later that afternoon, I met with a group of first-year teachers. We were discussing classroom support, but the topic veered into unofficial mentorship. Mr. Denton's. Intimidating, one of them admitted. Another added. I asked if he had any tips for managing grading load, and he said, some of us don't need help. They chuckled nervously. I didn't. Instead, I asked quietly, has anyone submitted concerns about his conduct? Silence. He's got history here, one finally said. People assume it's just how he is. That night, I stayed late again, door closed, blinds drawn. I pulled up Denton's personnel file, reviewed his evaluations, his disciplinary notes, or lack thereof. There it was, nothing. Not a single official complaint. Not in 28 years. It wasn't that he was innocent. It was that the system protected people like him. People who knew the rules well enough to bend them without breaking them. People who got away with it because they'd always gotten away with it. Until now. I needed more. Facts, not feelings. Documentation, not memory. My story, what he did to me, meant nothing on its own. I'd watched too many people lose battles they should have won because they led with emotion instead of proof. So I went to the students. I started small, anonymous climate surveys, one-on-ones with student council reps, hallway conversations framed as casual check-ins. Patterns emerged. Students who loved history but dropped Denton's class mid-year. Parents who requested transfers without stating why. A quiet junior named Kelsey told me. He always says stuff like, college isn't for everyone, but only to kids with bad grades. He says it in front of the whole class. I asked her, how does that make you feel? She didn't answer, just looked at the floor. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Former students responded to emails I sent under the pretense of a school-wide alumni engagement initiative. One replied, he made me hate reading. Took me years to believe I wasn't stupid. Another wrote, is he still there? Jesus, I used to have nightmares about that class. And then I found the paper. It was buried in a file box in storage, one of those neglected archives that smelled like dust and old toner. I had an intern helping me organize them for a district audit. It was a final project. U.S. History. 2010, my name was on it. My handwriting, my formatting. My work. Graded D+. No comments. No feedback. Just that familiar red pen slashing its way across the pages. It was the same paper I'd burned. Except apparently, I hadn't. Somehow, a copy survived. Tucked in a folder labeled Retained Samples. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it proved anything useful now, but because holding it, physically holding it, dragged every buried feeling back to the surface. I could see myself again, 17, cheeks hot, stomach sinking, sitting in the back of room 213, while my teacher chuckled and announced, some of us just aren't cut out for college. That was the day I stopped speaking in class. That was the day I stopped trying. And that's when it finally hit me. It wasn't just me he had done this to. It was dozens of us. Maybe hundreds. Year after year. student after student. A slow erosion of self-worth delivered with a smile and a tenure contract. He didn't break rules. He broke people, and they let him. Until now. I placed the paper gently back in its folder. Then I started a new one. A personnel file. Private. Separate from the official channels. But airtight. With documentation. Statements. Dates. Emails. Quotes. It would be slow. Surgical. Bureaucratic. The way revenge should be. Not loud. Just irreversible. There's a sound that comes with truth when it's written down. A cold, papery weight. Not dramatic. Just final. Like a verdict sealed in an envelope no one wants to open. By the end of September, the envelope was almost full. Every day, after the last bell rang, I would return to the principal's office, close the door, draw the blinds, and begin assembling. Statements from students, some anonymous, some brave enough to sign their names. Screenshots of emails from parents asking, "Why is my son suddenly failing history after being an A student?" Or, "Why did my daughter come home crying again?" Notes from staff, carefully phrased, cautiously worded. But I read between the lines. "Mr. Denton can be dismissive," one wrote. "He struggles with newer teaching methods and classroom technology." Dismissive was generous. Struggled was an understatement. The man hadn't opened a professional development email in 6 years. But he knew which battles to avoid. He never yelled, never cursed, just undermined, just demeaned, quietly, publicly, and always with a smile. I wasn't alone in seeing it anymore. But I was still the only one who could act. The turning point came in mid-October when a new student named Isaiah transferred in from out of state. Bright kid, well-spoken, thoughtful, but shy in groups. One morning, his mother called me. She was upset, not angry, just hurt. "I thought this school would be different," she said. I asked her what happened. "He told my son he should focus on practical skills instead of dreaming about Ivy League nonsense." Said it in front of the class. My son hasn't spoken at dinner since. I didn't write her words down. I didn't need to. That night, I drove back to school after dark. No meetings. No staff. Just me and the file. I added the page. I stapled the documentation. And then I locked it away. That was the moment I knew Denton's time was up. But I didn't file the report yet. Not immediately. Because there was one thing left to collect, his response. Not to an accusation. To change. So I staged the opportunity. At the next staff development day, I scheduled Denton to lead a breakout session, Innovative Strategies in Historical Pedagogy, a title I knew he'd find flattering. I framed it as a recognition of experience. His ego accepted the bait. That morning, I sat in the back of the library while he stood at the front with a slideshow, pulled from some dusty USB he hadn't updated in years. "Now, I don't believe in overcomplicating history," he said to the group. "It's dates, names, consequences. That's what students need. Not feelings. Not interpretations." The young teachers around him shifted in their seats. One raised her hand. "What about culturally responsive teaching?" Denton chuckled. "That's a trendy phrase that doesn't change facts." He was unraveling, exposing himself. And I was recording every word. Not illegally, just discreetly. District-approved observation protocol. After the session, I thanked him publicly. Praised his candor. Watched the staff nod stiffly. Watched the divide widen. Then I went back to my office, uploaded the video, and added the transcript to the file. There was no anger left in me. Just clarity. I made the call to Human Resources on a Tuesday. "I'm submitting a formal personnel review," I said. "Pattern of emotional harm to students. Refusal to adapt to mandated instructional standards. Evidence compiled over 2 months." They didn't push back. They knew the name. "I assume you're requesting a due process hearing?" the HR director asked. "No," I said. "I'm requesting a preemptive retirement agreement." "Does he know?" "He will." That night, I sat in my office long after dark. I opened the drawer, pulled out the paper from 2010. My D+. I put it through the shredder. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Because the past had done its job. It had shaped the weapon I'd become. Now I was ready to use it. There's a kind of silence that only lives in schools after hours. No bells, no footsteps, just the hum of old radiators and flickering fluorescent lights. That's the silence I walked into when I made my way down the East Corridor on a Thursday afternoon, file in hand. Room 213. Denton's room. He was still at his desk, grading something with the same red pen he'd always used, its cap clenched between his teeth. He didn't look up when I knocked, just muttered, "Doors open." He was chewing gum. He always chewed gum when he was irritated. I stepped inside and closed the door. Now he looked up. "Principal Bell," he said, dragging out the title like it tasted sour. "Back again? Another observation?" "No," I said, walking slowly to the front of the classroom. "This isn't about observation anymore." Something in my tone made him lean back. He dropped the pen onto the desk. I held out the folder. Thick. Heavy. "What's this?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just placed it on the desk in front of him. He opened it with the same casual disdain he gave most student assignments. Until he saw what was inside. He turned a few pages. Stopped. Turned one back. Stared at it. A printed transcript. Then another. A signed student statement. Then an email chain. The color started draining from his face by page 10. "Where did you get all this?" he asked, voice tightening. "I compiled it," I said. "First-hand accounts. Staff feedback. Classroom observation. Parent complaints. 28 years, Mr. Denton. 28 years and not a single official report. Until now." He snapped the folder closed. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "You've been gunning for me since the day you walked in." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I've been watching. I gave you every opportunity to change. You chose not to. You chose the same smirks, the same passive insults, the same condescension wrapped in tenure. You chose comfort over growth." He stood now, slowly, like a man realizing he'd misread the room, the building, the moment. "You think you can get rid of me with this?" he said, tapping the folder. "You know how many principals I've outlasted?" "None of them were me," I said quietly. "I have tenure. You had tenure. This file, and the board, will see to that." He picked up the folder again, as if it might somehow be lighter now, as if the contents might have changed in the last 30 seconds. He found the last page. A formal letter. HR seal. A recommendation for separation. Retirement in lieu of formal disciplinary action. Final day, 3 weeks from today. He read it twice. Then he looked at me. "You're really doing this," he said, stunned more than angry now. "I already did," I replied. "You've been scheduled to meet with HR tomorrow morning. You'll have a chance to make a graceful exit. Pension's intact. No public scandal. But it ends here." He laughed once. A dry, bitter sound. "All this because I gave you a D in high school." I smiled, but there was no humor in it. "No, Mr. Denton. You didn't give me a D. You gave me silence. You gave me shame. You made a 16-year-old boy burn the thing he was proudest of. That boy is gone. I'm here now. And I don't burn anymore. I document." He sat down heavily, like someone who'd just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid. I left the folder on his desk. As I walked out of the room, he called after me. "You think you're better than me now?" I turned, hand on the door. "No," I said. "I've always been better than you. I just stopped needing your permission to believe it." I stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind me. I didn't need to look back. That room, his sanctuary for nearly 3 decades, felt smaller now. The walls closing in. The desk, suddenly too big for a man who'd lost all the power he never deserved. By the time I returned to my office, the secretary handed me a message. "He called," she said. "HR confirmed. He'll sign the papers in the morning." I nodded, but I didn't feel triumphant. Just still. The kind of still you only feel when the engine stops, but your hands are still gripping the wheel. 3 weeks later, Raymond Denton stood in the staff lounge holding a sheet cake no one had asked for. The frosting read, "Farewell, Mr. Denton. 28 years of service," in red cursive. Fitting, really. Read to the end. Teachers filtered in, offered polite smiles, quick nods, one-liners about retirement and free time. No one lingered. I watched from the hallway for a few moments before stepping in. I didn't want to ruin his goodbye. I wanted him to ruin it himself. He did. "I suppose I should say something," he began, tapping a plastic fork against the side of his paper plate. The remaining half of the cake sat untouched. "I've seen a lot of change in this place. Not all of it good. Not all of it necessary." A few people looked away. "I came here to teach history," he continued. "Not feelings. Not trends. Just facts. Maybe that's not enough anymore." He scanned the room, waiting for someone to argue. No one did. "That's fine," he said finally. "You can have your progress. I'll take peace." He raised his plate slightly in the air, a limp attempt at a toast. Then he walked out, brushing past me without a word. I let him go. Outside, the sky was that gray shade of late autumn. The kind that promises cold whether it rains or not. Denton walked toward his car, the same battered sedan he'd parked in the same spot for decades. He didn't turn around. Not once. Back in my office, I pulled open the drawer where the folder used to live. Empty now. HR had it. The district had what they needed. My part was done, but the space still felt full somehow. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock. Kelsey, the quiet junior. The one he'd told to be more realistic. Can I come in? Of course. She stepped inside, hesitant. I heard he's leaving. He is. She nodded. It feels weird. Yeah, I said. Sometimes justice doesn't feel like fireworks. Just silence where there used to be noise. She smiled faintly. I wanted to say thanks. For listening. For taking us seriously. You deserve that much. She hesitated at the door. Can I ask something? Anything. Did he ever do something to you? I paused. Thought about my answer. Not something. Everything, I said. But that's not why he's gone. She tilted her head. He's gone because he kept doing it. That night, I stayed late again. The school was empty, dark, quiet in the way only schools are after everyone's gone. I walked the halls, past the lockers, past the trophy cases and the vending machines. And then, almost without thinking, I unlocked room 213. The overhead lights flickered to life. It was just a classroom now. Neutral. Hollowed out. The nameplate had already been removed from the door. The desk was empty. The walls bare. No more Denton. Just space. I stood at the front of the room for a while. The same spot he used to stand, delivering his quiet cuts. I tried to imagine what it would have felt like to sit here again, as a student. To raise my hand without fear. To believe the work I was doing mattered. But I couldn't imagine it. Not then. Only now. As I turned off the lights and locked the door behind me, I didn't feel proud. Or vindicated. I felt responsible. Because the truth is, revenge isn't clean. It doesn't erase what was done. It doesn't give back the years, or the courage, or the confidence that man stole from dozens of kids like me. But it stops the bleeding. It draws a line. And sometimes, that's enough. As I stepped outside into the cool November air, my phone buzzed. A message from Kelsey. Thanks for making school feel different. I stared at it for a long time before replying. It is different. Because you're still here. I slid my phone into my pocket and started walking. Not away. Forward.